When you go into a fish store today and are lucky enough to find decent quality swords, the best fish you'll ever see will top out at about 3 to 3.5 inches. Crossing the original wild helleri swordtail lines with platies back in the 50s and 60s to create the colors we have today also created swords that are smaller than the wild fish. The result is an attractive fish, but it doesn't look much like the original helleri swordtail. Many of the varieties once popular became smaller and eventually disappeared altogether. The original red brick swordtails are no longer seen at all, and the very attractive red velvet swords have also nearly disappeared from the hobby. This is a photo of a fish I used to breed here. It was created by a customer that looked pretty close to the color of the old red brick swords, but it was a red velvet sword crossed with the Zophophorus mayae. My customer wanted to create a swordtail that looked just like the 6-inch fish he remembered from the 70s. I've heard more than once that the cause of pet shop swordtails becoming smaller is the result of mechanized pond sorting methods at fish farms, creating stock that became smaller over time by sorting out the largest fish. As a young fish keeper growing up in northern Ohio, I was really interested in the biggest swordtails and wanted to be the person that kept the healthiest, biggest swordtails of all my friends. It never happened. I was never that person, but I did have friends with tanks of 5.5 to 6-inch fish. Stories at that time often spoke of the old red brick swordtails that were over 6 inches, and at the time no one had ever seen what the wild form of this fish even looked like. None of the wild strains available today were in the hobby. So today, I focus on pure lines of the largest wild swordtails. I continue to learn how environment affects their growth and what you need to do to produce the biggest fish. Simple quality care will produce some pretty decent sized individuals, but if you truly want to produce fish that get into the 5.5 to 6 inch range, there are things that you need to do to make it happen. The fish room here receives a 15% daily water change, and all the tanks are kept bare bottom with a single layer of 1/4 inch pea gravel over 1/3 to 1/2 of the tank bottom, which provides the majority of the nitrifying bacterial filtration. Filtration is provided by 4-inch box filters, live plants, and moderate light. The base dry food that I use is a 50-50 mix of a fortified spirulina flake and a krill-based carnivorous flake. The swordtails here receive frozen cubes of baby brine shrimp daily, and when specifically aiming to grow out large fish, I'm also sure to add either blackworms, bloodworms, or whiteworms 3 to 7 times a week. The Zophophorus mayae is often said to be the biggest swordtail in the world, and I posted a video on them not too long ago. The fish here, when the video was made, looked good. I wasn't trying to grow out the largest mayae at the time, and they're the fish in this video. After it was made, I decided I'd try again to raise up some truly large fish. The Zophophorus mayae was only named in 2002 and first collected a few years earlier, and still behaves very much like a wild fish. So when I was getting them really big, they were in this 40 breeder. This tank routinely produced 5.5 to 6 inch males, but not all will reach that size. After that recent X-Mayae video was posted, I started thinking again about the variables that produce big fish, and in just a few months I'm seeing males now of the size that I was looking for. This is an older Metaframe 75-gallon tank on the central water changing system, with the bottom set up as mentioned previously. In the tank are 3 box filters that provides aeration and some water movement, a 250 hot magnum filter with moderate light, live plants, and the temperature for the mayae is kept at 74 to 76 degrees. The tank is fed at least 3 times daily, 2 of the 50-50 mix and the other of a live or frozen food. If you want to get the biggest fish possible, add a daily feeding of live or frozen blackworms, bloodworms, earthworms, or whiteworms. They can also get really large on Daphnia and frozen adult brine shrimp. Though my tanks are not the best example of stocking levels, keeping your numbers low will contribute to healthier, larger fish. A close eye is kept on the tank, and if it begins to get the least bit cloudy due to heavy feeding, I'll do a quick water change by adding tap water with the fish room hose to top off the tank, which then drains back down through the automatic drain system, the equivalent of about 5 to 10% water change. This is in addition to the daily 15% changes. I need to do that with this tank about every third day, so a tank of 40 gallons or larger, generous water changes, aeration, filtration, and frequent feeding of quality foods are generally the most important variables. My goal is to ship out 2 to 4 month old fish that will grow out to become full-size fish, and I'm always experimenting with a combination of tank sizes and feeding schedules to see what produces the healthiest fish. The Xiphophorus montezumas and helleri rio otapas are the two species that I do the most work with along those lines, and when the young are well taken care of, the adults will become particularly large. But there are a couple pitfalls and things that can happen on your way to raising large fish that don't make sense. I'll see if I can address a couple of them here. You must keep an eye out for when you're trying to develop especially large swordtails that many of the swordtail species will produce what are called early maturing males. I've also seen this in mollies, but cannot say that it happens with the limias. But what happens is a male matures earlier than his brothers, giving him a reproductive advantage over them. The compromise is that he stays really small. With swordtails, their overall body growth tends to slow down dramatically or stop once they begin to show secondary sexual characteristics, such as a gonopodium and a sword. For this reason, you want to choose late maturing males to be your breeders. The biggest male breeders produce fry that will become the biggest fish, and of many traits you can lose in a breeding program, size is one of the hardest to get back. The problem is that in the confines of an aquarium, the early maturing males will breed first, the smaller fish are quicker and more likely to get to the females first. If you don't remove the early maturing males and allow them to breed in your aquarium, the overall line will diminish in size over time, easily within just 2 or 3 generations. So why is it that we can put a group of helleri swordtails into a 29-gallon tank with heavy water changes and frequent foods, and they do well but don't grow large? For starters, the swordtails I have here simply do not get truly large in tanks smaller than about 40 gallons. I've tried to grow them out in 30-gallon tanks with generous water changes and feeding, but the best fish produced in a 30-gallon didn't compare with those raised in a 55. These helleri have been raised in this 30-gallon, and it's even on a central sump where water is changed throughout the day, and yet their size is still compromised. And this is another big point where the tank is located. Due to possible subtle differences in light and temperature, where the tank is placed can affect where you will grow the biggest fish. I'm constantly experimenting here with trying to find the best places in the fish room where each species does its best. However, if you keep them in ponds, they'll grow huge, and many customers keep them in outdoor ponds. The helleri rio otapa males can exceed 6 inches. Unlike the mayae, they are not as heavy-bodied and are longer and sleeker with a slightly longer sword in proportion to their body than the mayae, though it's common for the mayae to often show very long swords. In this 55, the rio otapas do very well. They stay healthy, they grow large, and produce fry that beyond what the tank can handle. Many things that you would think work against big fish are going on here. The tank is way too overcrowded, the food eaten is not what it should be because it's so overcrowded, there's just so many fish in the tank, and the only frozen or live food they receive is frozen baby brine shrimp. But for some reason, large fish are consistently produced from this tank. 6-inch fish have come from this tank on more than one occasion, and the young fish coming up, they grow consistently and look to be developing into full-sized fish. So after looking at the helleri rio otapa in that 55, here's what the helleri look like when raised at much lower density levels, same if not better food and feeding frequency, with the same amount of water changed by the automatic system. In addition, which the 55 doesn't have, this 29 is on a central sump as part of the Plico grow-out tank, so it receives an extra level of filtration. But the fish in this tank grow out to be much smaller, and though healthy and large enough to distribute, they're not 5.5 to 6-inch fish. So why do the fish grow so large in the 55-gallon tank, where what they like is so strong that they still grow large despite other obstacles, such as overcrowding? Well, the answer, in the case of this tank, is a combination of a number of things. The size tank they are in, the temperature, and the water movement. To get the largest growth, their environment must stay consistent, and challenges must stay to a minimum For you want their energies and resources to go into growth, not coping with environmental instability or possible fending off of diseases that may be necessary in a less, very well maintained aquarium. That 55-gallon tank is far more stable and consistent than the 30-gallon tank on a central sump. These wild swordtails are also generally understood to do best at 72 to 75 degrees, which is where the 30-gallon is. But this tank, placed up near the ceiling, which stays at 2 to 3 degrees warmer. In combination with the heavy plant growth to compensate for lower oxygen saturation levels because the temperature is higher, the 15% daily water changes, and the 3 times per day quality feedings, the slightly warmer temperatures seem to encourage the best growth in this fish. Lastly, the Relotopas in the 30-gallon tank live in a dynamic environment with lots of water movement, so they're often moving and swimming to compensate for the current. This may keep them healthy, but it also keeps them smaller. The result is that the environment in this 55-gallon tank just clicks for this population at that location in this fish room. Not to confuse the issue just a little further, but this doesn't mean that cooler temperatures will produce smaller fish. And some argue, with some justification, that exactly the opposite is true. Here's the thinking. Because fish will live longer at cooler temperatures, and if fish will continue to grow as long as they live, you will ultimately end up with larger fish at cooler temperatures. However, as can be seen in this tank, using cooler temperatures hasn't produced larger fish for me. In fact, you'll run across information from the 60s that advocates for lower temperatures to grow out the biggest fish, and that could be why people say that it can take a year to grow some swordtails to sexual maturity. Here, the montezumae and the helleri Relotopas take the longest to sex out, and they're both generally sexed out and ready to breed by 8-9 months. I should mention that some of your success may come down to, as it has for me here, finding out over time how fish respond to their location in the fish room. To some this might sound silly, but I'm not kidding. When a fish doesn't do well, I make a mental note to consider other locations for that fish into the future. When a species does well, I leave it where it is. This is a 55-gallon tank mounted up near the ceiling that for some reason the Montes just love. There's never been a sick fish in that tank, the males grow huge, and I go in about every 6 weeks and remove fry. I know that the tank temperature also plays a role in this tank's success, and though it requires brief additional manual water changes every 3rd or 4th day to help keep water quality up because it's so heavily stocked, that tank has shown me how it wants to be taken care of to stay in great shape, and I do my best to oblige. If you want to set up a tank to raise large fish, little issues with the fish can happen. Possibly the fish every once in a while don't look their best, plants may not be doing well, aeration could be better, all the usual stuff that tells you that a tank isn't at 100%. And you'll want to resolve those issues first before trying to raise large fish. When you're raising big fish, you want all of your resources and energy to go into producing body mass and size for the fish. So you want the tank to be as comfortable and as minimally demanding on the fish as possible for them to grow their best. Yes, you can go too far and create fish that are robust and fatty, and this will affect their reproduction. But that is not an extreme I have seen personally. Lastly, when you're looking to grow a fish, such as the mayae, to its potential, the fish needs to feel safe and secure. Particularly the mayae, as they are still a very wild fish in their behavior. If the fish is stressed, it's using energy that could be going into growth. So, though it might be tempting to put a small group of mayae into a well-lit 40-gallon breeder with little else in it, so you can keep a close eye on them, fish you would get from their being in a tank where they felt secure and safe would be far healthier and better looking fish in the long run. You might avoid the potential for disease by keeping them in a minimally furnished tank, but that thinking is why the large show guppies of the 80s and 90s became especially prone to disease. They'd been raised in clean environments for many generations to produce the largest fish. Your swordtails will never see compromises to their immune systems in the same way, but large size is helped by the fish being kept in clean conditions. So here we are back at the mayae tank, where the mayae that are being grown out are becoming especially large. Here is the group today, and as you can see, there are 3 or 4 males in this tank that are going to be in the 5.5 to 6 inch range. The mayae seem to prefer slightly cooler temperatures than the helleri. 74 degrees would be the minimum, 74 to 76 for them, And though they should be lightly stocked to get the biggest size, this tank is particularly overcrowded. I realize that it doesn't look it, but there are fry throughout the bottom third of this aquarium that need to be removed. I certainly wouldn't crowd them in an effort to grow big fish, so when you do set out to grow a small group of them, as large as you can get them, it's best to keep your stocking levels as low as possible. My regret is that swordtails were possibly the most seen and kept type of tropical fish, known for their hardiness, their distinctive look, great colors, and ability to reproduce routinely in the home aquarium. In those first clips of current pet shop swordtails, the first 3 freshwater fish stores I visited had no swordtails at all. And when you do find them, the wide variety of color varieties that has been reduced to where there's only 1 or 2 fish being sold, the wild appearance green swordtails are gone, red swords, high fins, Berlins, albinos, etc. are no longer or are rarely seen. But that doesn't mean you can't still get some of them. I get asked often how to obtain certain fish that were once seen in pet stores, and most are not aware that what they are looking for may still be very much available, but their local stores simply aren't bringing them in because they're not convinced they'll make enough money from them. All you need to do is ask, and though you might need to make a slightly larger purchase, say 10 fish as opposed to 3 or 4, most stores can add something to their order without a problem. And if your fish is available from a wholesaler that they deal with, your fish may be found, even if you may not have seen it in a local pet store for many years. So it is worth giving it a shot. So I was at an American Library Association convention about 2002, 2003, and having a discussion with Jim Langhammer about this very topic that the video is about. And for those of you who don't know Jim, he's a noted scientist, one of the most knowledgeable people about live-bearing fishes in the U.S., and he's been a good friend of mine for over 20 years. But anyway, so he and I were discussing this, and he was talking about how he hears these stories of the Xiphophorus montezuma being 9 and 10 inches in the wild, and couldn't figure out why it is that they didn't get that large in the aquarium. So we're talking about it, and he decides, I'm going to set up a 30-gallon tank and put just 3 fish in it, best of circumstances. And he also had a line of Daphnia that was brought over from Moscow in 1966, the Russian red Daphnia. I still have them here. They're doing great here. And so he kept them going in his basement. So he says, I'll stuff these things with Daphnia, give them the best food they could possibly have, and we'll see how big they can get them. I can get them. I said, great. So I said, just, let me know. We'll keep in touch. We'll find out how these go. So he calls me one day and says, yeah, man, I got it going. I got the tank set up. I got the 3 fish in it. They're eating really well. They're doing great. So we decided to keep in touch every couple of months. So every couple of months, how are they doing? Oh, they're doing great. They're really huge. They're doing good. I don't know. Okay, great. So eventually, I talked with them, and when they get to be towards adults, I said, now, how big are they now? They should be getting pretty good size. He says, well, we had people come over to the house yesterday, and they were looking at them. And the guy there, who's a fish keeper friend of mine, he thinks they're 9 inches now. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He goes, they're pretty much 9 inches. And so I'm probably going to go ahead and close the tank down since I've accomplished what I wanted to set out to accomplish. And they're really awesome looking fish, so it can be done. And I said, well, did you take some pictures of it, like next to a ruler? He's like, oh, I haven't got time for that. He goes, I don't have a camera here. I said, do you have a video camera? He said, no, gosh, no, I don't have a video camera. So I says, Jim, you got to take a picture of these fish before they're gone, man, or they're just going to become some kind of legend and another one of the stories to add to the pantheon of nonsense out there about the Montezuma. And he says, no, I can't do that, That's okay, Jim, look, do this, please. When it comes time for you to go ahead and these Montes get moved on, however you want to do it, send them to me. I want you to, if you're going to go ahead and call them, wrap them in paper towels with alcohol, and when I get them here, I'll go ahead and I'll put them in formaldehyde or whatever, and get them fixed. And because I want to have them, I want to keep them. He's like, you're out of your mind. I said, no, I mean seriously, go ahead, please do this. So he did. So I get them, and I took them and got them into a container with some of the proper alcohol. Formaldehyde isn't used any longer, and got them set. But before I did that, I went ahead and set them down to a ruler. And they're big Montes. There's no question they're big husky Montes. It's obvious that they ate a lot of Daphnia in their lives. And when you measure it against the ruler, it's 5.5 inches. And here are those fish. So this is the jar. So as you look closely at the jar, you can see each one of them. You can see how when you look at this fish when it's alive, you can say, whoa, that's at least a 7-inch fish. But it's because they're so broad and because they're so heavy bodied. But when you put them against a roller, they're exactly 5.5 inches. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I've kept that bottle here now for 12 years to share it with you. So that's one of my prized possessions when people ask me about how big fish can get. So part of how big fish gets, and this kind of fits into with the, oh my goodness, 8-inch swordtails from the 60s. That might not have been entirely the case. So anyway, thanks for watching. The next question is from Robert, and he writes, I think I need to buy some Levamisole. My guppies have calamanus worms, but I heard that a treatment takes 3 weeks and that the Levamisole doesn't really kill the worms, it just stuns them. Is this true? I've heard a lot of interesting things about Levamisole. I first discovered Levamisole in the late 90s when we first started seeing the live bearer disease come through the aquarium trade. And it wiped it out immediately. It was a great drug for this. There seemed to be nothing else in the stores available that would do what the Levamisole did. So it came in my experience, to treat the live bearer disease. But also, it turns out that many serious hobbyists, I believe, going back to the 50s and 60s, were using it to kill off worms and other types of parasites, and that it's been known for camellinus worms for a long time. In the couple times that I've used it for camellinus worms, you would do a treatment, and the worms will sometimes fall out of the fish. Their death is immediate. I have not seen some people who say that they'll come back to life after a while, that supposedly they're stunned, and they'll go in and they'll siphon any worms off the bottom, because a full treatment is 2 doses. So between the 2 doses, they'll go in and siphon off any dead worms. There's nothing wrong with doing that anyway, and there may be something to their coming back or not being fully treated, I don't know. But it's usually very effective and very easy to do and very quick. So to dose it, a 1/4 teaspoon will dose a 100-gallon tank. So what I do is I went to Walmart and I bought these little plastic Ziploc bags and put 5 on them, a 10, a 20, 30, 40, 50. And then with just a coffee saucer and a razor blade, I go ahead and I divide the 1/4 teaspoon of the Levamisole up into little 10-gram, 10-gallon packets, little 10-gallon lumps, put them in a bag, set them aside, and then that way I can, when it's time to treat, I just pull out the bags that I need and use it. So you would treat, you do a 25% water change, then treat, and then do another water change, wait 24 hours, do another water change, then treat again, and do another water change, and you're golden. I have only once had a situation where I've had to retreat again 3 weeks later because I saw something reoccur. And when that happens, it's usually that when you treated, you've got some kind of an organism, they lay cysts, they lay eggs, whatever. They'll sometimes be up around the rim of the aquarium. If you treat and the water level is lower, then when you fill the water level back up after treatment, sometimes you'll bring the cyst back down into the water and you'll reintroduce the parasite to your aquarium. So when I treat with the Levamisole, I go ahead and I bring the aquarium water level all the way up to the top. I treat, and that usually takes care of it. But like I say, there was once that I wasn't confident that the treatment took, and I retreated again 3 weeks later. The fish tolerate it well. It's not a bit of a problem. And the dosage that I recommend here comes from the original scientific dosage when you used to be able to buy it in the jars and dose at one drop per gallon. That was back in the 60s and 70s. There were some scientific houses that I had contact with when I was at the university where we could still get it, but that concentration was where I derived the dosage that I recommend for my Levamisole. So anyway, if you need Levamisole, it's always in good supply. I sell it in 10 gram, 20 gram, and 52 gram packets. Just write me for the current price and all of that, and I'll get right back to you, and hopefully whatever your problem is, we can get it solved. Thanks. Okay, my next question is one that deals with something that we often run into. I know I had a situation like this when I was younger. There are some fish that are sold in a pet shop that you should never buy. And, well anyway, this Aaron writes me and says, desperate to solve a big shark problem. First, I did not know that Pangasius sharks grow to be 3 to 4 foot long. I have 2 sharks. They are 11 inches now and cramped in a 55-gallon tank. So for those of you who don't know what Pangasius sharks look like, here's one here. This is his fish, actually. He had written me a while back about those white patches and how to cure them. So we had dealt with some medicine issues to get rid of that. But this is what the cats look like. Now the problem is they've outgrown my financial abilities for a giant tank, and I can't find someone to take on the responsibility of these guys. The only solution I can think of is euthanizing the poor guys. So a little bit, I wrote him back. I'm really sorry to hear. You have my sympathy. I've certainly been in this situation before. And he wrote me back, wow, very kind of you to take this situation seriously and spend so much time reading and replying to my email. People seem to be very uncomfortable with such a delicate subject. The shop I bought them from is closed. The other big shop is not ideal. Plus, they also sell Pangasius cats. I really hate doing this. Kind of a nightmare. Crap! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Thanks again for your time, Aaron. So then a few days pass, and we were talking about various medications, different types of ways to euthanize these catfish. And so he writes me back and goes, well, I completed euthanizing these 2 poor guys this morning. Sad business for sure. I used a blunt object to the head, harsh method, but in my opinion as humane as any. I just wanted to let you know. Thanks for all your help in the past. I don't expect to be keeping any fish in the near future. I don't like a bunch of laws, but the selling of these and similar fish should be illegal unless you can prove that the customer is prepared for giant fish. I did not do my homework before I bought these guys. My big mistake. Damn. Thanks again, Aaron. Thanks, Greg. Your comments meant the world to me during this horrible situation. I don't mean to sound so melodramatic, but this has been kind of a traumatic experience. Thanks again, Aaron. So which fish are these that we're talking about? The shovel-nosed cats, the red-tailed catfish. Ask the clerk when you're there and say, how big does this get? For instance, the Bayless sharks that you see at almost every PetSmart and Petco, they get to be 13 inches, but most people don't realize that. So, sometimes when you go to a fish store, you look at a lot of these fish and you think, not only will most of these fish never get the opportunity to breed, they'll never get the opportunity to reach adulthood because they'll get too big. Your standard pleco, the common pleco, will get to be 12 to 13 inches. How many people do you know that have bought plecos and had them get to that size? So, you have to do some research before you go to a pet shop or you go to buy something. And be careful, because some places you go to, they'll sell you something because it's cute. But little do you know that it's going to end up eating you out of house and home and becoming too big for the tank that you put them in within just a couple of months. So the Pangasius cats are that way, like I say, the shovel nose, the red tails. So do a little bit of research. And if you've got questions on a fish or whatever, go ahead and write me and I'll get right back to you. Thanks. Thank you for watching this video on raising large swordtails. We've all seen so many things on, put them in a big tank, feed them well, give them good food, water changes. But I hope that gave you some more ideas and some things I'm looking at. always to get them growing real large. But the next video coming up is an important one. It's one I've been working on for a long time, and it documents the process I've been going through now for 6 years to learn how to breed the Synodontis lucipinnis. Not the petricola, but the lucipinnis, which is an entirely different fish. It's much smaller, but it has a high white background that can be selectively bred for. And I never understood why, no one else had done it. Well, I soon understood that, some aquarists can sometimes breed a few of them at a time. They're not an easy fish to raise up. They're not an easy fish to get to breed. But I've got it pretty well dialed in now that the breeding is consistent, and I'm producing batches of 150 to 300 at a time. So this next video will go ahead and document and show you all the various ways I solved the different problems that came up, and how I finally got it dialed in a step-by-step way that you can do it as well. So that will be out here in another couple of weeks. And again, as always, if you've got any comments, or please, if you've got questions about fish things or whatever, go ahead and write me so I can use them in these videos. And I would love to hear what you have to say. So thanks a lot. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.